And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I'm your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another waffle wrap up. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it has been far too long since we have talked the waffle. Tons of things have happened. The end of the home and away for both the men's and the women's and the finals have all commenced since the last time I got to sit and talk with my amazing, awesome co host, one of the voices of the waffle when it comes to it, and one of the co hosts of Around the Waffle, Mr. Paul Persick. It is great to see you, sir. It has been far too long since we've talked waffle football.
I second that, Johnny. Great to see you, and hello, everybody. Yes, it has been far too long, but life and scheduling does take a little bit of time away. It does get a little bit chaotic, especially around finals time. But no, it's good to be here. We're off the back of an amazing finish to the WAFL season, and of course, we're talking about the Waffle W finals. By gee, weren't they something else? An amazing
Hmm.
final series. Dare I say it, the best Waffle W final series in the current form of the Waffle W competition since it was formed 6 years ago, and a thrilling climax to the men's season as well, with another amazing final series with so many storylines around each game. And can't wait to recap it all here today. As I sit back out of the office, just sitting back, unwinding for a Thursday here in the West, just looking back on a remarkable season of footy.
Yes, it has been fantastic. So, since the last time that we have talked, rounds 15 through 20 of the men and rounds 15 through 18 of the women's have commenced. I don't want to put Paul through having to remember over 2.5 months. So, I'm going to really quickly go through the last four rounds and the last five rounds for the men's of their home and away competition. And then I will bring Paul in to review all of these finals. As he said, an amazing women's final that just when I couldn't think it could get any better, it found a way to get better. And the men's finals was also incredible. Cannot wait. So let's do it really quickly. We will start off with the women's round 15 through 18 really quickly. We will hop right through it again. Some fantastic results, some shockers, some stunners. Let's go through it. Round 15, West Perth gets a win over East Perth 42-9. Perth get the win over Peel Thunder 42-19. East Fremantle pull a shocker, knocking off Claremont 30-18. And Swan Districts beat South Fremantle 34-28 to end round 15. We jump to round 16 when my computer decides to move fast enough. We jump to it. Claremont starts the round off with a smashing of East Perth 92-9. Swan Districts get an impressive win over Peel Thunder 82-14. West Perth stun the Lions 29-27, and East Fremantle ends the round with a 64-19 win over the Perth Demons. We move now to round 17, where we see Subiaco bounce back from the loss and impressively smash East Perth 65-1. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 1 point in a game of football. Wow. Peel Thunder get a win over South Fremantle 32-18 in a shocking upset here that really could have cost South Fremantle. Claremont get a win over West Perth 36-26, and Swan Districts end the round with a 41-24 win over the Perth Demons. And the ending round of the home and away sees South Fremantle get upset by West Perth 55-43. Perth get a win over East Perth 49-23. Claremont absolutely smash Subiaco 34-1, and Swan Districts edge out East Fremantle 15-11 to end the women's round. Really quickly, Paul, what a run to the end of the women's rounds, because there were tons of things, including some fun social media things, because one win could have brought a certain team into the finals, fall just a little bit short.
Well, West Perth needed to win against South Fremantle on that Friday night in round 18. They needed to win by something like 7 or 8 goals, and that was going to be impossible against the South Fremantle side, who were going to miss the finals themselves if they didn't win. But they didn't do enough, unfortunately, West Perth. They did finish off the year with a bang. But I will say their season, I think, was over before it began because of the injury to Kat Bennett. Kat
Mhm.
Bennett is one of their strongest leaders in the West Perth women's side, and I think her being out for the whole season really had an effect on the continuity of the West Perth side. So I think, to be blunt, their season might have been over before it began, even though they
Mhm.
did finish on a good note. And Swan District, who would have thought they would have not only get into a first semi-final, but host one as well,
Mhm.
because they were tipped to miss the finals. They were tipped to miss the finals at the beginning of the year, but They beat the last year's runners-up, and all of a sudden, we've got a fascinating final series. And those last two games you mentioned, and we're going to get into them a little bit later, they'll have to meet again a week later.
Yeah.
The stakes and pressure is a lot higher because home and away rounds, when it comes to finals, means nothing. We now go into finals. The pressure, it's cooked up to 180 degrees.
Yep, 100% on that. All right, so let's fly through the last 5 rounds of the men's home and away. Thankfully, a few buys will not as many results that we have to go through. We'll start off with Perth getting a win over Swan Districts 85-72. East Fremantle beat Peel Thunder 86-76, and Claremont with a smashing of Subiaco 122-35. We move to round 16, where we see South Fremantle with an impressive win over Subiaco 99-38. Claremont edge out a strong fight off from East Fremantle, getting a 5-point win 75-70. West Perth falls short to East Perth 101-75. And the Peel Thunder get a win over West Coast 68-56. We move to round 17, where we see the Swan Districts knock off the Subiaco Lions 43-25. East Perth with a hiding of West Coast 124-55. South Fremantle continue their strong season with a win over East Fremantle 115-71. East Perth fall to West Perth 81-66, and Peel Thunder get smashed by Claremont 54-16. We move to round 18, where we see South Fremantle get a win over East Perth 75-28. Perth with an impressive win over Peel Thunder 98-69. East Fremantle get a win over West Coast 65-48. Claremont with an impressive win over Swan Districts 84-46, and a tight one as Subiaco pulls off the upset over the Falcons 76-74. We move to round 19, where we see East Fremantle beat out East Perth 88-73. South Fremantle continue their run through the WAFL with a 130-68 win over the Falcons of West Perth. Claremont get a nice win over Perth 86-73. Peel Thunder with a smashing of Subiaco 90-33. And Swan Districts survive a scare but get a win over the West Coast Eagles 78-73. We go to the final round, the last round of the men's home and away season. South Fremantle end the home and away as strong as they have all year with a 144-57 win over the West Coast Eagles. The Claremont Tigers get a win over East Perth 89-80. East Fremantle smash West Perth 139-63. Peel Thunder beat Swan Districts 105-51, and Perth get an impressive 40-point win over the Subiaco Lions 93-53. I mean, it's hard not to say it through 20 rounds. I mean, the we got to talk about South Fremantle were impressive this season, looking very, very good all year long.
Just an incredible run by South Fremantle. They had only one loss back in round 5 against the West Coast Eagles of all teams, but the appointment of Craig White as coach, I thought, had a big effect on the side. He's a premiership player at South Fremantle twice. He's South Fremantle through and through, and you've obviously got some big boom ex-AFL recruits that really shone for the Bulldogs. Hamish Free in the ruck was brilliant all season. It was hard to beat, even against the likes of Ollie Eastland of Claremont and Scotty Jones of East Perth. And we also had Trey Rusco, who was second to Tyler Keitel on the Burnley and Allen middle race, but always a threat in front of goal. The strong boys at either end of the ground playing their roles well. Bletchenden and Florenca, the usual suspects in midfield. But also, I think the big factor for me in South Fremantle's fight to the top of the ladder was the return of Hayden Schloit, the king of Bulldog land, diagnosed with testicular cancer back in January, made his return in the game against Claremont in the second half of the season to rapturous ovations. He was positioned in a forward pocket. He was not obviously 100% match fit as he would want it to be as a result of the chemotherapy and all that sort of stuff. But he found a role in the forward pocket, and only once he was held goalless after that return. He would kick on average 1 or 2 goals a game. He kicked 3 one time in the second half of the season. So, credit to Craig White and the South Fremantle coaching staff for giving Schloit a role that he can be well suited to, given the condition that he was in. But it was just magnificent to see a champion of his calibre return, but just an impressive run by South Fremantle all throughout the regular season, and deservingly, they finished on top of the ladder. Well done to them.
Yeah, definitely. And then a huge shout out, love it, that the Perth Demons make a finals. How awesome was that? Because I know they've had some few down years over the last few years, but to see them make the finals, how awesome is that for the Perth Demons side?
It was great. It's a great story in the WAFL, along with Hayden Schwartz at South Fremantle. Great to see the Perth Football Club making finals. And that's what WA football and the
Yep.
WAFL would like to see. A competitive
Hmm.
Perth and make the competition so even, so intriguing. And for a Perth side that, has been starved of success since the late 70s, had only made finals twice now since 1997, to be coached by a great tactical mind like Mark Stone, who loves his stats and really gets into the best of his players. And he did that with every single one of them, whether it be experienced recruits from interstate like Charlie Constable and Brendan Parfitt, both premiership players in the VFL and AFL respectively, or some of the young kids as well, like Daniel Hill, who's a live wire up forward. Blake Schlenside, the former South Fremantle player, he's really suited his role as a ruckman forward over there at Perth Football Club. And the fans at Lathbane are some of the most loyal in the WAFL, and they turned out in force for the home games, and especially in the final series where they really were competitive against the sides like East Fremantle and Claremont, which we're going to get into later. So for the Perth Football Club, it's a great story to see them back in the finals, and I reckon it's the start of a sort of a new chapter in the Perth Football Club. Through President Adrian Barrich, Brad Dodd, footy manager, and Alan Chubby Styles, one of the great inspirational figures of the club. I think it's a great new chapter that's building for the Demons, and I reckon they can climb further up the ladder next year.
Yep, definitely. I really hope so because just as you said, the loyalty of the old Perth fans is fantastic. Like I said, so great to see them make the finals this year. So let's jump into it. We've gotten through the home and away. We've got finals, and let's start off with a bang. Let's go to the women's finals because, as you said, this has to be one of the greatest final series ever. It isn't just a great grand final. It isn't just a great preliminary final. Every single round had intrigue, had incredible footy. So let's start with it. We will start round one. We saw in the qualifying final, we see Claremont versus Subiaco, and the Tigers just edge out the Lions by one, 29-28. And a hold my beer moment. You aren't going to upstage us. Swan Districts get the win over East Fremantle by one, 16-15. Combined total win by 2 points. We'll keep this run going because, as you'll see, there was very little very little room between all of these teams in the finals. What a great way to start off the finals. Two 1 point thrillers between four really good football teams.
You couldn't script it. I mean, that's Hollywood stuff right there. I mean, who would have thought not one but both finals would be separated by a point? And
Mhm.
keep in mind that second semi-final, Claremont and Subi, that went into extra time. Megan Green got a free kick at the tip of the goal square. It was cancelled out originally, but it was a free kick to Megan Green. She was held without the football in the goal square. She goaled to level the scores, and that sent the game into extra time. We all thought Subiaco were going to pinch the game in the final few seconds. And then in extra time, Claremont got the only score. Subiaco at the other end had two chances but missed both, and Claremont just by the skin of their teeth. It was one of the luckiest Claremont wins I've ever seen. But by gee, it was a rip snorter of a game. You couldn't script it any better. And then after that, we all thought, okay, let's try and settle down. Swan Districts and East Fremantle maybe play a different game. That one was separated by a point.
Mhm.
Sweet Lord of mercy. Who would have thought that both finals would be separated by a point? Griffith and King sensational for Swan Districts, Governors and Racing, all brilliant for East Fremantle. But Swan Districts pulling off an upset. I thought at the time that East Fremantle were going to pull this one off because of the experience that they had got in
Mhm.
the finals, and
Yep.
maybe the low expectations that Swan Districts had on themselves because they weren't expected to make the finals gave them a little bit more freedom. So,
Yep.
it was a real surprise to see Swan Districts get the job done considering they had not scored a goal up to three-quarter time, and all of a sudden they pull two goals out of the hat and seal the game.
Mhm.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's crazy stuff. East Fremantle casualties, early casualties, and Swan Districts go on to a preliminary final against Subiaco.
Yep. And then which is a great transition because not only do they get the tight win, they pull it off, but then in the preliminary pile, they pull the stunner of the season as they knock off Subiaco by three, 40-38. The Swans are on to the grand final to face Claremont. I mean, this was another hold my beer moment because oh my gosh, this was a stunner. This so shockwaves throughout the Waffle W landscape because I think a lot of people kind of went under the assumption this was going to be a Claremont Subiaco grand final.
Yeah, everyone had that expectation because they had dominated the season all
Yep.
throughout, and then all of a sudden we had one red herring pulled by Claremont on Subiaco, and then Swan District did the same thing. But then in the preliminary final, they played an outstanding brand of footy, the second half in particular. But Subiaco will be haunted by this game to an extent because they played catch-up football. 4 goals to
Mhm.
nil in the first quarter, If you're held goalless in a first quarter in a final, more often than not, you're not going to be winning your games. But
Mm-hmm.
credit to Subiaco in the last 10 minutes. They were exceptional in getting some goals back through while Wolmerans and Hobbs and got to within 2 points. But it's that early leeway that hurt them. Swan Districts with that 4-0 quarter. Maguire was sensational. Ajuk, Dario, Humphreys and King amongst the goals. But Subiaco, they almost pinched this one at the death, like what they did against Claremont. They had their chances but weren't able to convert. 6-2 to 6-4. Subiaco, after dominating the season, out in straight sets. But they'll be hurting. They'll be hurting by this defeat.
Mm-hmm.
And I reckon they'll go into 2026 in an angry mood after letting a grand final opportunity slip away. And I said on Around the WAFL, the only expectation for Subiaco is a grand final next year. A grand final or bust for Subiaco, because the side that they have got on paper is just exceptional. I mean, Petresky, Wolmerans, Quinn Schofield, Lisa Steen, who made her debut at the West Coast Eagles side as a top-up player recently against GWS in their win on Sunday. So I reckon Subiaco have got some tremendous talent there. They're all AFL calibre talent, and they didn't make the grand final. Quite a surprise there. And all of a sudden, we've now got a Claremont Swan Districts grand final that nobody expected, but everyone seems to forget. Swan Districts have won 2 WAFL premierships already after it was formed in its current iteration in 2019. So they know how to get it done. But after missing the finals last year, well, they made a semi-final, I should say. My apologies. They made a semi-final last year, but they were expected to miss at the beginning of the season. And now they're in a grand final. What a fairy tale story.
Yep. Incredible fairy tale story. Unfortunately, Claremont Tigers did not get the script for the full-fledged story as they get the win in the grand final 24-23. Another fantastic WAFL W grand final we were treated to. As we said, every single game in this WAFL W final was decided by less than 3 points. Holy crap. How awesome is this? Again, Claremont, they are just so good. They get it done when they need to. All due respect to the Claremont Football Club. They have built such a great WAFL W program, and huge raps to Swan Districts, because this was one of those. I think a lot of people were worried, could this get out of hand? Swan Districts gave it an almighty crack. Just felt just a littlest bit short.
Well, the conditions really did play into Swan District's favour, because the conditions were horrible on grand final day. Although it was a little bit better than what we had last year over at HIF Health Insurance Oval, where the ground was an absolute mud heap. Rat Lane's facilities and surface really was the key to making sure the grand final was played there, because the surface is a whole lot better, can handle a lot more rain than HIF Health Insurance Oval. And the conditions really played into Swan District's favour early in the game. They took Claremont away from their usual strengths in the early minutes, but Claremont, trademark Claremont football, they get on the board, a couple of goals, and they just put the pressure back on Swan Districts through the like of Matilda Husband, Jamie Harkin, and also Sarah Viney, who was an absolute ball magnet on grand final day, especially when you combine her work with Sargent and Harkin and Juliet Kelly, who earlier in the season had over 40 disposals, just sensational. Mackenzie Webb and Claire Orr looked sort of unheralded on grand final day, but they were a part of some crucial passages. Summer Yaron scored the Swans 3 goals in that grand final. She was a real live wire up forward. They really came back with great ferocity, held Claremont scoreless in that final term. Their back six really had to work overtime when Claremont surged the ball into their forward 50. Emily Maguire had a shot on goal from the boundary line in the final few minutes, went for the drop punt, maybe should have gone for the check side, but pressure in a grand final, got to cut her some slack. She was in the heat of the moment, wanted to win the premiership for her team, and unfortunately the kick just slewed wide. Claremont did everything they can to clear the 50, and they held on by a point. And I have to send an apology to Jack Schwartz, the Claremont coach. I often tipped against Claremont during the final series. I went with the Swans to win it, and yes, I'm happy to eat humble ham pie that's coated in tiger. So yeah, it's not the first time that my grand final team has fallen apart, but no, I take my hat off to the Tigers. The experienced side, tremendous program, and a testament to what they had done over there at Claremont 3 times in a row, back-to-back premierships they have won. 3 times in a row they've been in the grand final. 3rd premiership in 4 years that they have won. Just an amazing program over there at Claremont, and I take my hat off to them. And will they be going for 3 in a row? Who knows? Because Jamie Harkin, who won the Lou Nitter medal the 2nd year in a row for the best on-ground player, 2nd time in her decorated career, it's going to be interesting to see where Claremont goes, because a lot of these players aren't going to be in the same side anymore. It's sort of an end of an era for the Tigers. But, as soon as supreme talent goes, more supreme talent come in. So I
Yep.
won't be surprised if they make another grand final, but I think it's going to be a lot tougher.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. Again, all hat tips to what Coach Schwartz has done at Claremont. I mean, he's built a machine there. There are very few clubs in the country that can do what Claremont has done in the Waffle W. So again, I always tip my cap to him. It's one of those, it's hard to tip against him because they're so consistent. They're so good at what they do. They don't get rattled normally. Again, if it weren't for Zippy Fish in that East Fremantle side, we could have been looking at a four grand finals in a row. So, I mean, just incredible work. So, as much as I don't want to go away from that, because again, I'm still stunned that, I mean, 1 point, 1 point, 3 points, 1 point. Just insane finals. Let's go to the men's because we got to give them just as much love here. So we'll go to the men's finals. We'll start round one, where we see East Perth beat Claremont by 13, 66, 53, and Perth knock out East Fremantle out of the finals 106-77 on this one. We jump to the second round of the finals where we have in the qualifying final to get to the grand final, South Fremantle just too good with a win 79-20, and Claremont get a win over Perth 82-43. Stop right there, coach. You did not let Paul talk about the first round of the finals. What is wrong with you? My apologies. We'll rewind back. First round of the finals, Paul, and I got to say this again, it made me smile. Perth get a win in their first final back from so many years, and they advance. How awesome is that?
Hey, mate, I'll cut you some slack. It has been a long season, so I'll excuse you with that. It's all right. I've been through the same thing as well. But the first thing I think in the first week of the finals was the turnout. It was just amazing. Just like under
Mhm.
4,000 at River Fitness Stadium for the qualifying final, and then just under 6,000 at Good Grocer Park, first final there in some 3 years after all the disputes with council after their redevelopment. It was just tremendous, especially down at Good Grocer Park. They were out in force by the Cam Bar, the Sullivan Logistics trucks in the outer, the main grandstand where the media suites are. It was an amazing atmosphere. That's what WAFL football is all about. The fans experiencing some of the best football in the country and showing a great atmosphere. It was a tremendous showcase of what WAFL football truly is all about. And Perth, 28 years since their last finals win. The 1997 first semi against East Perth was their last finals win. But to turn it on after half time was just incredible. They were all out attack and they sent East Fremantle packing in the first week of the finals. The big spark for me in that game was when Blake Schlentold goaled on the halftime siren. When he goaled, you could notice the body language of the two teams. East Fremantle had their heads down, thinking that that was a chance for them to build a strong lead, but they didn't. But for Perth, their body language was a lot better. They were in 5 points now, and they believed their self-belief that was instilled in them by Mark Stone after round two, when they got the job done against West Perth at Joondalup, was evident for everybody to see. Everyone in the Perth side had their heads up, and they just went on with it after half time, 10 goals to 4 in that second half. They just went bang, 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 and East Fremantle just had no answer through their ill decision making and their ill discipline as well. They conceded a couple of silly 50-metre penalties in that second half, and that pretty much summed up where East Fremantle went wrong in that second half. Clark with 6, Payton with 4, that 1-2 punch up forward, potent as ever. And again, Charlie Comfortable, dominant, Corey Byrne, Matthew Taylor, all terrific. But I was in the rooms afterwards, in the Demons rooms. I had never seen so many grown men cry, ever, in my time of covering WAFL football. That win meant so much to the playing group and those behind the scenes, even more so than their win over South 5 years ago when they qualified for the finals for the first time in 23 years. There was so much emotion inside the club rooms by the players, by the personnel. It meant so much. It's a wonderful story. It was scenes of emotive hysteria, is how I would sum it up, because for the Perth Football Club to be in a position where they haven't been for over 30 years was just amazing. And
Mhm.
for the Perth Football Club, it was one of their biggest wins in recent times. President Adrian Barrage, Peter Sumich, who's one of their forwards coaches this season, he was even in tears, and a lot of the players were in tears as well. Just tremendous. And for the qualifying final as well, just going toward Revo Fitness Stadium, it was all won in the last quarter. It was all won in the last quarter for me because East Perth, they just had more pace. They just had more discipline around the ball. They had more match winners while Claremont looked slow in that last quarter. And I think as well, Ash Prescott summed it up a week later when they knocked out Perth. It was an attitude thing. It was an attitude thing. The attitude and intensity were off in the last quarter at Revo Fitness Stadium, and they just let East Perth get first to the football. They let their players knock the Tigers players around, and they dictated the game on their terms. East Perth dictated the game through Brayshaw, Rakos, Anaduri, and Scott. But also what was very important was Ross McQueen, the coach, took a very calculated gamble and rested several key players the week before. And East Perth pushed Claremont to within 9 points. The 4 players that came back all played key roles and won them the game. They looked the fresher side in the last quarter. They had fresher legs. And that, to me, was the difference as well in that qualifying final and got East Perth into a second semi.
Yep, definitely for sure. As we said, we've done the second round of the final. So I'm not gonna. I mean, South Fremantle was just way too good, and unfortunately, the Perth Demons, unfortunately, the fairy tale run fell a little bit short. But again, all happiness to the Perth Football Club again, getting that win, as you said. So many tears in the club rooms is fantastic because it shows it's important that they really dialed into the fact that this football club has dealt with so much disappointment, and now to have some success and to see some winning seasons, get a win in finals. This is a building block for their future. Again, Claremont, they did what they needed to do with an impressive win, bouncing back after a less than great start into the finals, get the win, move on to the preliminary final. So let's go on to the preliminary final, where we see a setup and East Perth bounce back from the loss from South Fremantle to get a rematch in the grand final with a 46-41 win over Claremont. But I just looking at the scores, I mean, Claremont's got to be kicking themselves 11 behinds. If you could kick straight, they may have found themselves in a grand final.
You just took the words right out of my mouth there. Cast your mind back to the first semi last year. 6 goals, 12, lost by 1 point. You kick straight, you win your finals. It's as simple as that. And on this occasion, I can't sympathise with the Tigers. Unfortunately, I just can't.
Yep.
And the reason being is because of the opportunities that they let go to waste. Look at the side that they have got. Bolton, Rogers, Alvarez, England, Eastland. And they were expected to get it done. I went with the Tigers to get it done against East Perth, who were looking a little bit flat, and the wet conditions aren't usually suited to the East Perth style. And East Perth win the game. Just amazing. And well done to East Perth. Credit to them the way they bounced back. But Claremont, to me, let their chance slip away through poor inaccuracy and just the attitude. I was like, oh, we're expected to get it done against East Perth. The conditions are going to suit us. That's not the way it goes in finals football. And since Ash Prescott has taken over as coach in 2021, they have made finals every year, made 1 grand final, lost it. No premierships. Last 2 years, they had big chances, but the goals are right there. The goals are right there in front of you. And they missed it. 6 goals for 8. In those 2 finals combined, 11 goals, 23 behinds. In those 2 finals, the first semi last year and the preliminary final this year, the game was torrid at best. It was intense, but it was torrid because of the conditions. And there was a lot. There was a lot of scuffles, a very spiteful preliminary final. Keep in mind as well, a big story came out of that game. Hamish Brayshaw got reported in the opening minute of the game for rough conduct. Fortunately for East Perth, he was cleared and he went on to play in the grand final. But a lot of match winners for East Perth in the end. We talked about Brayshaw. Stan Wright, that trusty left foot of his, always hitting his targets. Tom North, exceptional. Ty Wilcox also for East Perth down the back line. Jai Bolton, was that his last game? I don't know. I certainly hope not. I'd love to see him go on and get that elusive premiership. Channel England, last year's standover medalist, terrific Ollie Eastland against Scotty Jones in the ruck. That was a pulsating battle. Eastland won the hit out 48-35, but in the end, East Perth just held off the Tigers late in the last quarter and would go on to a grand final against South Fremantle. And there was a lot of hysteria in the East Perth rooms because they know that their mission of redemption was only 1 more win away. They wanted to get to a grand final. And also keep this in mind. They had gone into the finals with 3 losses in a row, including Claremont in round 20. So going into a finals with 3 losses in a row isn't the best way to go in. But what a way they bounced back. Okay, you had the second semi-final loss sandwiched in between, but to beat Claremont twice in 3 weeks, in different conditions, different scenarios, different situations, is just a testament to how good of a final side they have been, East Perth. Okay, they haven't been able to get it done on the big Sunday in September, but they are still a very good final side.
Hmm. Yep, definitely for sure. And you hate saying it to break it down as simple as it is, but it's the old adage, bad kicking is bad football. So unfortunately, for sure. Let's move on to the ultimate of ultimates, Optus Stadium, grand final day, and South Fremantle's magical season ends with a win, 56-54. But I mean, social media lost its absolute mind because controversy seems to be ruling the day. So, Paul, talk me through this. Was this as controversial as everybody is making it off? And does East Perth have a gripe about maybe having lost a grand final that they had a chance to win?
It was always going to rear its ugly head, Johnny, because it's a grand final, the ultimate stakes, the ultimate game. And this only blew up because not a lot of people knew what the rules were. Even I thought, because it was in the heat of the moment, it was thought,
Hmm.
was it 50 or was it not 50? But looking at the footage several times in the hours since the grand final, turns out that the umpires had been correct not to award a 50-metre penalty because under the rules in the WAFL, and before I do, just going back to what exactly happened, the ball was in the centre square. There was a holding the ball free kick. Matty Parker got tackled by an East Perth player, and turned it was Baker, Jordan Baker, wearing the number 10. The umpire paid holding the ball. The siren went. After the siren went, the South Fremantle player kicked the ball away, but it was in celebration. That was after the siren had sounded, and as the umpires had the hands above the head to signal time expired, game over. Under the rules, a 50-metre penalty cannot be paid once time is expired. The umpires have their hands over their heads and the siren is gone. If it was in general play, if it was, let's say, with 10, 15 seconds to go,
Hmm.
the 50-metre penalty would have been there.
Yep.
But since it was all over, it was time expired, end of general play, you can't pay the 50-metre penalty. And besides, the kick was a long way away anyway, so it really got onto it, Jordan Baker, to his credit, but it was never going to make the distance. So, it did blow up because a lot of people didn't know what the exact rules were, but it did get kicked off 24 hours later by WA football. In the end, it was a common sense approach. It was a fair decision in the end, and South Fremantle won the premiership. But gee, they almost blew it. They
Hmm.
almost blew it in the final 15 minutes because they went into the last quarter with a 3-goal lead. It was a very scrappy, very ugly game in
Hmm.
perfect conditions, which usually shouldn't be the case. But I have to credit East Perth here because they took away South Fremantle's strengths in that game. South Fremantle's strengths are all-out attack, play direct, get plenty of goals, which is what they did for most of the season. But they were well held, especially Rusco, who was held to 1 goal. Strom and Schloit both held to 1 goal as well. But when that last quarter came about, East Perth, all of a sudden, they decided to show up because they were very scrappy themselves against South Fremantle, who, weren't at their effective best because of what East Perth were able to do. The Royals really struggled to get it out of the defensive half at centre toward the end of that first half, and they had a lot of turnovers, a lot of poor disposal. But then they sharpened up in the last quarter, 5 goals to 2 in that last quarter, and they got to within 2 points. And we were thinking, hang on a minute, are East Perth going to snatch this game? Have South Fremantle blown it at the worst possible time? But the Bulldogs just had enough in reserve, but only just. And a couple of other facts here. Closest WAFL Grand Final margin in 15 years,
Hmm.
that 1 point margin in 2010, that amazing Swan Districts win over Claremont. And the first 2 point margin since, get ready for this, 1996. And the losing side that day was also East Perth. How ironic and heartbreakingly ironic too. But a great end to a great season.
Yep.
Fitting that we get a close grand final finish. And South Fremantle, 15th WAFL Premiership, and the postscript out of that as well was the final bow at the King of Bulldog Land. Hayden Schloit, he retired hours after the game, 225 games, over 246 goals, Sandover medalist, 4-time WG Hughes medalist, and a 2-time Premiership player. And considering the story that he has had since January with the aforementioned diagnosis, and now
Hmm.
farewelling the game of the Premiership, what a better way to go out.
Yeah, you cannot argue with that. And if you look at it by the whole season, South Fremantle should have won it. They were the best team the entire season. There's no argument, no doubt, not only by record, but just the way they played. And again, to bow out a great champion with a premiership is always fantastic. So that is it, sir. That is all Waffle W and Waffle done. Season over. Nice little bow. always a sad time of the year because no more state league football. But I thought before we get out of here, before we wrap up this waffle wrap up season this year, let's do a little bit of review. I want to talk a little bit about the season. Let's start off with the women's competition and let's jump right to it. Best and fairest, we gotta give her some love. Dara Kirk medal winner. Paul, I will let you say it. This Dara Kirk medal, I mean, Kerr medal was, I mean, kind of easy to guess who was going to get the medal around her neck.
I'm only just going to say this in a few words. There was no way Krista Petrucci was not going to win it. She was the winner from round one, easily the best player in the Waffle W competition. It was a no-brainer. And as I said before, Sarah Michelle medalist, around the Waffle Player of the Year, and now, of course, the Darla Kerr medal. The Petrucci trifecta is now named in her honour. Even Waffle W fans of other clubs agree with me. There was no way she was not going to win it.
Yep, yep. You can almost call it the Triple Crown. She's the first ever Triple Crown winner on that one. I absolutely love it. So, the one negative topic we're gonna go through for you, sir, in the Waffle W this year. What was your biggest disappointment?
I'd have to say West Perth. Out of the teams that were the biggest disappointment for me, I'd say West Perth because after their run to the preliminary final and the strong amount of depth they have got all around their playing list, you would expect them to go on with it. But obviously injuries pre-season, especially the aforementioned one to Catherine Bennett, they were going to be up against it all throughout the season because they were without one of their big leaders. And okay, they finished just outside the top four, but honestly, they should have been in that, maybe even a second place on paper at the start of the season. But some losses in games that they should have won. Okay, they got a win against Subiaco. That showed that they were able to take it to top sides. But I reckon they just didn't really get going after those injuries pre-season. And to me, that was the real disappointment.
Yeah, for me, maybe this is a little bit harsh, but I want to see East Perth progress. The fact that Perth comes in this season and jumps right over them, gets 3 wins, really kind of establishes themselves as a competitive team. East Perth unfortunately still had struggles. Maybe it's a little bit of me as I want to see this entire competition have the parity. I want every team to be competitive, and when you have a team in East Perth, unfortunately this year, where really they went in the underdog in almost every game during the season. It's very difficult. So I'm hoping that progression, the years on, that it gets better. That would be my disappointment. I want the competition to not have that team where, every week that's the team that's going to lose. And I never want to see that in the women's competition or any competition ever where there's a clear spooner and it's not even close. Never like that at all. So, biggest surprise, sir. Let's go the exact opposite. Biggest surprise for you over this Waffle W season.
I'm going a bit left field on this one. I'm going to take you to my show around the Waffle. We're on the eve of round 18. And one of the matches that me and Ethan Ross were previewing was the game to decide the minor premiership, Claremont and
Mhm.
Subiaco. Big game, this one. Pre-season, Rothy made a prediction that he would not tip against Claremont at all.
Remember this?
And guess who he tipped? Subiaco.
Sue.
I
I
walked out of the
remember you
studio
gave
with a
him
result.
so much stick when you did what he did. That was funny.
I nearly had a heart attack. I nearly had a heart attack thanks to the bugger. And ironically, Claremont won. So that was the biggest surprise. Rothy tipping against the Tigers despite making that pledge pre-season. Actually, I went to Subiaco before he made his tip, and we both looked like hands. So if you want to blame someone for that round 18 tip, blame him. Rothy, I'm sorry, but I have to say
I will say biggest surprise, but I'm glad that it was a surprise for me is the Perth Football Club getting 3 wins in its inaugural season. The fact that I I think you had even said it on Around the Waffle. No entering Waffle W team had won more than one game, and they win three. So it
that.
was incredibly awesome to see the Perth Football Club come in, get wins, be competitive, fight against some of the better teams in the competition and be competitive. It wasn't just an easy win as the first year team. So for me, biggest surprise, I have to say the competitiveness of the Perth Football Club this year. Again, I hope it continues because I love seeing parity in these competitions because it's so much fun when you never know who's going to win it. It's a tipper's nightmare, but I absolutely love it for the competition as a whole. So I always got to do this. I know this isn't easy, and there's so many games to pick. What was your game of the year this year in the Waffle W?
Always tough to pick because there were so many close games. But
Agree.
I'm going with the second semi. I'm going with the second semi-final. The one that went into extra time was just incredible. That felt like a grand final. You know,
Hmm.
because the conditions that we had that day was less than subpar over there at Red Oak Fitness Stadium. It was so muddy over there, but the girls gave it absolutely everything. It remained close right up until that final kick to send it into extra time. And then it was back and forth, back and forth. Claremont got the only score. Subiaco had chances. Claremont held on 1 point. And another reason why I tipped that game was because it would be the stepping stone for how amazing the final series would be. So the second semi-final for me.
Yeah, for me, maybe it's just it's the Cinderella part of it, but it's Swan District's win over Subiaco in the preliminary final. I know it was the bigger of the margins when it comes to the finals this year with the 3 points, but man, was it so good to see the joy on the Swan District's players when the final siren went to get the win and to kind of throw that spanner in the works again with everybody assuming Subiaco and Claremont would play in the grand final. So for Swan Districts to pull this one, to get the win, to get into a grand final, and to kind of be the antagonist of everybody's thought process of how the grand final is going to be, I thought it was an incredible game of football. So for me, a little bit of the soft spot again for Rick for Rick a little bit with the Swan Districts girls getting into a grand final. So for me, it was the preliminary final, Swan Districts getting the win over Subiaco. So I want you to grab your crystal ball, sir. I know you love looking into this. I know that you're already counting down the days for the waffle season next year. What are you looking forward to next year in the Waffle W?
I think I'm looking forward to a closer competition. I think next year is going to be a lot closer than what it was this year, especially that race for those top four spots and those just outside the top four. I reckon it's going to be a lot closer than some may think. Obviously, with the play turnover at Claremont, that's expected, and obviously at Subiaco, Swan Districts, and East Fremantle. I reckon the competition is going to be very close, and you'll see sides like West Perth, South Fremantle, and Perth maybe if they can build on their first season, maybe have that race for the four. I reckon East Perth and Pure Thunder will improve, not to the extent of getting into the top four, but they'll improve that they can cause upsets to the plans of the teams that are racing in the top four. So what I'm looking forward to is a closer competition. I think it's going to be
Yep.
even closer than what it was this year.
Yep. I was going to say this. You're reading my mind, sir. I want to point to your head and mine. I thought the same thing. Is I think next year with the year another year in, so many of these fantastics again, Subi being that kind of deter to the Claremont dynasty that I think next year could be quite a fascinating year because I think the competition is going to it's going to even out. It's going to be so much fun going into each week, not 100% knowing who's going to win. So yeah, I look forward to another some parity even more in the Waffle W on the Waffle W competition. Let's jump over to the men's. We'll do the same thing. We will start off, sir, Sandover medal winner. And I'm fascinating. I love this one. Sandover medal winner. And did you like the call by the umpires with this win by Charlie Constable of the Perth Football Club?
It was either going to be one of two. I thought it was going to be Constable or Matty Parker of South Fremantle, and it went down to the last game. Matty Parker didn't play in round 20 against the West Coast Eagles. Constable got 3 votes in their win over Subiaco. That bolted him to the lead and was the first Perth Demons player to win a Sandover since Aidan Tropiano 10 years ago. So that's another reason why Perth have been so successful is that they've got great players, they're getting reward for effort, and Charlie Constable was a very worthy winner. He's had a wonderful season, averaging over 25 to 30 disposals, a weapon in midfield, can play a little bit up forward and down back. And that's why he's one of the best because he's so versatile and so mobile for a player of his ability. And he's got experience too, being a premiership player at the Gold Coast in the VFL a couple of years ago. But he's been able to remain match fit throughout the season as well. He was riddled with injuries from the midway point of last year, which affected Perth's plans to make the five. But Constable was remaining fit all throughout the season. He played some great, consistent football, even when his team was down. And he's emerged as one of the key pillars of the big four of the Perth Football Club. Talk about he, Scoble, Blake Schlinsog, and Parfitt. That's the Perth big four. And Constable, out of that big four, got the most reward out of that with the Sandover medal. Terrific season from him. Looking forward to seeing what he can do next year.
Yep, 100% on that. So, like I said, let's start off. We'll do the negative. Biggest disappointment this year in the men's competition.
Well, this one is even tougher than the women's competition because you can break it down to either one of three. One of them would be Swan Districts. because of the amount of injuries that they had had, and they really struggled to get going after their preliminary final run last year. They weren't really the same side, and obviously taking into account the retirement of Tony Knott after 323 games, the experience, their stalwart, was going to be out for much of the second half of the season, so they lost a lot of great leadership quality about them, and they were a young side for much of the second half of the season, but they struggled to get going, and they had about a third of their best 22 on the sidelines. Peel Thunder, reigning premiers, I
Mhm.
think to me were another big disappointment. I'll go as far as to say the round one draw against Claremont set them back big time. They led by 28 points at three-quarter time, and they stopped, and they surrendered 2 points. They should have won that game. If they had won that game, then maybe their season trajectory would have been a little bit different, but that round one draw set them back big time. An opportunity that went begging, and a lot of injuries to players like Reedy, concussion to Brody, and a lot of in and out of the Fremantle side with their alignment really prevented Peel from achieving the same heights they had in their premiership year in 2024. But for me, the biggest disappointment, this might shock some fans, is actually East Fremantle. For me, that was the biggest disappointment, because before the round 10 bye, they were 7-2, and they were in second place on the ladder behind their arch rival South Fremantle. And many had expected then to maybe have a Derby grand final, a People's Derby grand final on that Sunday in September. But they just couldn't get on with it. I mean, losses at home to Swan Districts and Claremont. They lost to Claremont at home after being some 4 or 5 goals up, and losing to Swan Districts in the wet at home really set them back. They nearly lost to the West Coast Eagles as well, and then losses to the likes of South Fremantle as well. So that really set them back, and they had to settle for a fourth place finish. If they had won those 3 games, maybe they would have finished in the double chance and got themselves a home qualifying final, or maybe even a grand final. But and despite the players that they have got, you look at Leggett, Marsh, Murdoch, Joyce, Baskerville, all incredible players. Finn Gorringe leading the back line as well. But the fact that they were only able to win 2 out of 7 in that second half of the season after being 7-2, so a complete negative reversal of form, was really disappointing. And I'm expecting better from East Fremantle in 2026, because they are a tremendous side on paper, but the fact that they didn't execute in the second half of the season, and then to be knocked out in the first week of the finals again, was a tremendous disappointment. The biggest of the season for me.
Yeah, so I was gonna go Peel only because again, you win a grand final the year before. Really, there isn't a huge amount of turnover, and for them to fall short, and even you look at it, well, they're the side with Fremantle. Well, Fremantle wasn't hurting this year for injury, so it wasn't like they had to constantly have to deal with replacing AFL guys that have to go up. So for me, Peel Thunder, you win a grand final, then don't make it. You win a grand final and don't make it. You're in a dubious category there of grand finals that don't even make the finals the next year. So for me, it was Peel Thunder, but I can definitely see your point. East Fremantle really they fell apart in that second half of the year, just made finals, and then Perth kind of ended their misery really early in that final. So I'm with you on East Fremantle. I can see how you see that one. So let's go. Biggest surprise. What surprised you this year? The biggest surprise in the men's competition.
I think we can state the obvious. We're back in round 5 when West Coast beat South Fremantle. Who would have thought we'd see that? It was an amazing upset. I did that game with my round the WAFL colleague Ethan Ross, and we didn't think for a second that West Coast were going to turn it on against the eventual premiers, but they did. Bailey Williams was incredible, so was Malachi Champion. But the Eagles, the biggest surprise for me was how more competitive the Eagles were, because
Mhm.
they did get some concessions from WA football, which allowed them to be competitive, but they were able to take it on to the likes of South Fremantle, East Perth, East Fremantle, and West Perth to an extent. And Peel Thunder later in the season, they only fell short by a couple of goals. But besides that obvious one, the West Coast Eagles beating South Fremantle, the biggest surprise for me, it's obviously very tough to pick because there were so many. I think the biggest surprise for me was the grand final crowd. I think the grand final crowd at 23,000 was a bit disappointing. And that took me by surprise because South Fremantle and East Perth are two very well supported clubs, and the conditions were absolutely perfect. I mean, you
Mhm.
couldn't ask for a better day, and only about 23,000 turned up when we were hearing that about 30,000 tickets have been sold. So that to me was the biggest surprise on a negative side of things. But the Eagles South
Mhm.
Fremantle on a positive side was the big surprise. But on the negative side, the crowd at the grand final, I think 23,000 when we were expecting 30,000. So yeah, to me that was a bit tough to comprehend.
Yeah, I still remember the stunned response that you guys had on Around the Waffle after the West Coast beat South Fremantle and that. So I was gonna say that too. It's like the shocking one loss that South Fremantle has. is to West Coast, the Spooners. So it was just kind of funny to me. So yeah, that was my biggest surprise was the one and only loss by South Fremantle was to the West Coast. So I thought that was absolutely hilarious. So I want to hear this. I know you love your football. You love some exciting games. What's your game of the year in the men's competition?
We go back to round 12. Round 12, Subiaco and East Fremantle down at Sullivan Logistics Stadium, and an exhibition of football you rarely see these days. 32 goals kicked between the sides,
Hmm.
and Subiaco win by a point. An
Yeah.
amazing upset. And testament to what Subiaco have been through, it was weeks before Bo Wardman had departed as Subiaco coach and Nigel Hamilton had taken over. But Subiaco, they were tremendous in the second half. They started off with a 2-goal lead at quarter time, trailed by 3 goals at half time. East Fremantle came back in that second quarter. It was 1 goal the margin at 3-quarter time. East Fremantle pulled away initially, but then Subiaco recovered through the likes of Bartlett, Mayo, and Borchett to take back the lead.
Yep.
And East Fremantle had 4 chances in front of goal, missing all of them, including hitting the post once. And Subiaco just able to hold on by the skin of their teeth by a point. It was an amazing exhibition of football that we rarely see in modern times, and the Lions causing maybe the upset of the year, besides South Fremantle and West Coast. But to me, that was the game of the year back in round 12.
Great minds think alike, sir, because I had the same thing. I remember you guys, I remember when you guys talked about this on Around the Waffle, and I was like, I remember seeing that result and going through it. I was like, holy crap, what an incredible game of football between these two. And then again, the stunner that again, Subiaco had not been as strong and knocking off an East Fremantle side that a lot of people were talking early in the year, being a team to a grand final potential team, a premiership final team, and for this huge upset. So I thought it was fantastic. So I'm points to head in your head and mine, sir, because I thought the same thing. Round 12, Subi knocking off Fremantle. Can't go wrong there. So let's pull out our crystal ball again, sir. What are you looking forward to next year in the waffle?
Well, before we go to that, just quickly, I reckon just another memory, and pardon for my indulgence as well, was on grand final day, doing 2 grand finals. It was amazing. A couple of other memories, doing the reserves grand final and seeing East Perth, who went into the grand final with a negative win record, an 85 percentage rate, and they were 0-5 to start the season, and they beat Claremont. Who would have thought we'd see that happen,
Mhm.
whether it be Colts, reserves, or league? And East Perth, they were the first team to only allow less than 9 goals from Claremont in a game. Claremont they'd not allowed more than 9 goals, and East Perth, they were the first team to do it on grand final day, and they finished fifth, and
Mhm.
they beat the top team who were in their second straight grand final. And later on that day, got to be a part of my first grand final broadcast on Seven, on Seven Plus in the Colts grand final, which was, as I like to say these days, a circus dream came true. To be on the Seven broadcast, the Seven pin, the Seven mic in my hand, I was still like, holy crap, is this really happening? And I still pinch myself. It's like, did that really happen? But it did. It was amazing. It was surreal, and hopefully to be involved a lot more. And that's another thing I'm really looking forward to next year is the broadening of accessibility into the WAFL competition, because this is the first year where all the waffle games are on the screens of Seven, of course, one on the main TV and the others on Seven Plus via Front Row Screens, the company that I'm associated with. And I think that makes the competition so much more accessible, not just to the older demographic, but to the younger demographic as well, who can't make all the games. They can sit back, watch the game anytime, any place, anywhere. That's something I'm looking forward to next year. I'm also looking forward to the state game next year, back here in Perth, because this year was another great highlight when
Mhm.
West Australia at last won the Hayden Bunsen Cup from those pesky pro eaters called South Australia. We won it by 30 points. We kicked South Australia's butt at the Adelaide Oval. And to all my South Australian followers and Stanford fans, we're going to do it again next year. Bring your best South Australia, because we're going to get you.
I absolutely love it. I know when I talked with Phil Aspinall as he was preparing for that, as he was preparing to call that game, I know he got a hold of you and I told him, I said, Paul's strutting around like a peacock after they won that game. So absolutely love it. No, I love your passion for WA football is commendable. Sorry, absolutely love it. Congratulations on making your on your seven debut. That was fantastic. I saw the picture online. How cool is that? For me, I'm looking forward to another. I'm always looking forward to another competitive year. I'll be fascinated to see, can West Coast progress even? Can West Coast progress even more? Can Perth stack on this year's making the finals? How does South Fremantle back up the season again? Having some retirements, how will they have a stronger season? How will teams like West Perth bounce back? How will Peel bounce back? Will Subiaco see step up? So it's a lot like the women's. I'm hoping the parity for next year wraps up and gets a little bit closer because you always love a competition where there's so much intrigue. You hate getting to about 12 rounds into the season and you pretty much already know the five teams that are going to be in the finals. You just don't know where they're going to wrap up. So for me, looking forward to hopefully again another year of great parity in the waffle competition. Well, Paul, that is it. That is season review, men's, women's, all done. As much as I hate this time of year when we're wrapping up the VFL, the Sandful, and the Waffle, it's so much fun. All the footy that I get to pay attention to, that I keep track of. Again, I have coworkers up here. I've said it numerous times. Think I'm crazy because of how many games I try to keep track of every single week during the season. But it's a passion that I love. Your passion for waffle football, I commend and I love it so much. Your calls are fantastic. Every call that I hear, you love your footy, you love your waffle footy, and you love calling the game. So thank you so much for hopping on. I know Rick Gauchi could not help us this year with your schedule being the way it was. Were we as consistent as years before? Probably not. But every time we sit down and talk, I absolutely enjoy it. It is a very fond memory to sit down and talk waffle football with you, Paul. So thank you so much for helping me out this year on the waffle wrap up part of the show.
It's been a pleasure, Donny. It's been a lot of fun, and to all the listeners and viewers, a huge thank you as well for being a part of the show as well. And Donny, it's always been a lot of fun. And big shout out to Rick Gauchi. Fingers crossed that he can return next year, and we'll go on into three-piece. But I'll tell you what, it'll be something. It'll be something next year. I'm already looking forward to it. Already planning for 2026. But it's been a lot of fun, Donny, and I wish you all the best over the winter season over there in the US, summer here in Australia, and we look forward to a great season that's in store in 2026.
Well, I will keep the Aussie part of my life going because I cannot wait for the Ashes. I will say it right now. I know
Oh,
this is a footy show, but I cannot wait for the Ashes because I think it's going to be a scintillating series between Australia and England. Cannot wait. I've got my cricket balls already. I've been keeping track of it. Cannot wait. I know the ODI hat. I keep it up there. I always keep it in view of the camera as well. So cannot wait. I love my cricket. The Test cricket is just so intriguing with the tactical. So I cannot wait. I think it is going to be a fantastic Ashes series. Cannot wait for it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it. That is the last episode this year for the Waffle Wrap Up. That is going to do it for this episode of Donnie's Disposals. Again, if you like what I am doing, covering the awesome state leagues and anything when it comes to footy, please like and subscribe. And we will be back with more footy coverage very, very soon.